A couple of months ago, I started a screenwriting class for my film major at Depaul, and I quickly realized that I'm not great at writing. I realized that my creative writing needed improvement, so I haven't done this since middle school, but I started reading in my free time. The series I started with is a science fiction trilogy called The Three-Body Problem, and I have to say it was absolutely excellent. I loved every moment of reading it and managed to complete the entire trilogy in about 2 to 3 weeks. I also started Neuromancer and Children of Time, which are also very enjoyable. However, after reading this book, it helped change my view on how I look at the future. At first, I was hooked into the book by the prospects of alien, futuristic war, and spectacle. The book does include all of this and does a great job of exploring those topics, but what truly captured me was the author's deeper meaning in the text. In The Three-Body Problem, the author effectively proposes the question, what if everything we knew about science and the universe was wrong? How would we react? I've recently noticed a common misconception about science fiction. People often think of these great works of science fiction as a crystal ball, a literal prediction of what our technology is going to look like. But the truth, science fiction isn't about the future at all. Now obviously it's set in the future, but that's not really what I mean. Science fiction's main strength is using the future to critique the present. The setting is the argument. It allows us to examine current problems but slingshot them and the problems they'll cause 1,000 years into the future. But lately we've lost the plot. And there's no better example of this than the internet's favorite dystopia. Squid Game was a bleak and cautionary tale about dehumanizing people who will do terrible things to one another for money while rich people watch it for entertainment. So what did we do? We recreated it. Real people, real money, real entertainment. People watched a terrifying warning about late-stage capitalism and thought, wow, this would make for a great game show. And it doesn't stop there. Mark Zuckerberg literally renamed his company Meta after the metaverse in Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, a book where the metaverse is a hostile corporate hellscape that literally fries people's brains like a computer virus. We're looking right at the warnings and now using them as instruction manuals. A common example people point to is Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. It perfectly captures this idea of using the future to remix the horrors of the real world. When Atwood wrote the book, she set a strict rule for herself. She refused to invent a single gadget, atrocity, or oppressive law that human beings hadn't already done to each other at some point in real history. It feels like this terrifying, distant dystopia, but really, it's just a supercut of actual human history, repackaged with a sci-fi aesthetic. She gathered these scattered real-world puzzle pieces and snapped them back into one localized nightmare to show us how easily we could slide backwards. But there's another way we ruin sci-fi for ourselves, and it happens when we become completely obsessed with realism. Look at this review for Interstellar. The reviewer complains about the movie abandoning real astrophysics in favor of emotional shortcuts. They praised the first half of the movie for being hard sci-fi, but got mad at the climax when it didn't connect with them emotionally. Not to say that you can't dislike the ending, but blaming it on not being realistic is overlooking the point of the movie. The cinematic physics in the first half of the movie are no more real than the wild dimensional physics at the end, but because the audience demands scientific accuracy, they rob themselves of the emotional core of the story. If you're trapped in the literal mechanics of the plot, you're missing the entire point. So, if we stop demanding that sci-fi be a perfectly accurate physics textbook, and we stop treating dystopian warnings as cool aesthetic choices, then what do we actually get? We get a tool, a way to test human behavior under extreme pressure. In a world full of cultural anxiety and stress about tomorrow, science fiction doesn't just have to be a warning. Movements like solar punk use this exact kind of world building not to show us how we're going to be destroyed, but to model an optimistic vision of what we can actually strive for. Science fiction isn't a prediction, it's a mirror, and it's up to us whether we use it to build something cool or just keep recreating the nightmare.